Disappearing without a trace is terrifying, but sometimes the return is even more disturbing. These are 3 unsettling, true stories of people who vanished, only to come back with chilling tales that defy explanation. Story 1 by Daniel M. I was 26 when I went missing, or at least that's what everyone told me. It was 2017, and I was living in a small town in Oregon, working as a mechanic. One evening, I decided to take a drive into the mountains to clear my head. I remember the crisp air, the winding roads, and the feeling of solitude. Then, nothing. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. Nurses, doctors, and eventually, my parents. They looked older, more worn. My mother had tears streaming down her face as she hugged me, saying, "You're back, after all these years." Years? I was confused. To me, only a day had passed. But according to everyone else, I had been missing for 6 years. The authorities told me I was found wandering near the same mountain road, disoriented and dehydrated. I had no memory of where I'd been or what had happened. My ID was the same, my fingerprints matched, but I hadn't aged a day. Back home, things were different. Friends had moved on, my job was gone, and my house had been sold. I tried to adjust, but the world felt alien. Technology had advanced, slang had changed, and I felt like a relic from the past. I started having nightmares, visions of dark rooms, faceless figures, and a constant humming sound. I visited therapists, underwent hypnosis, but nothing brought back my memories. One day, I received an anonymous letter. "We're glad you're back. The experiment was a success. There was no return address, just a symbol, a circle with a line through it." I showed it to the police, but they dismissed it as a prank. But I knew, deep down, that something had happened during those missing years. Something I wasn't meant to remember. Now, every time I see that symbol, whether in graffiti or random doodles, I feel a chill. Someone is watching, ensuring I don't recall the truth. If you're enjoying these creepy stories so far, make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. If you have a terrifying experience of your own, send it to the email in the description below. Story 3 by Rebecca J. I was 12 when my older brother Ethan went missing. It happened on a late summer afternoon in 2014. Ethan had gone hiking alone in the woods behind our house in Vermont. He was 17, confident, and familiar with the area. But he never came home that night. The search lasted for months. Police, neighbors, and volunteers combed the woods, helicopters flew overhead, and posters with his face were plastered across town. Eventually, the search was called off. My parents were devastated. I was too young to fully understand, but I felt the weight of his absence every day. 6 years later, just after my high school graduation, I came home to find my mom sobbing on the porch. I thought she was just having one of her grief days, but then she said, "He's back." Ethan was standing in the kitchen, wearing the same clothes he'd disappeared in. Faded jeans, a navy hoodie, and his old hiking boots. But he looked wrong. He was still 17. He hadn't aged a day. At first, we thought maybe he'd been taken or hidden away. But he couldn't explain where he'd been. He claimed he had only been gone for an afternoon and didn't understand why we were all so shocked. Doctors ran tests, but nothing abnormal showed up. His DNA matched, his fingerprints were the same, and aside from a bit of dehydration, he was perfectly healthy. For a while, we were just happy to have him back. But soon, small things started to bother me. Ethan used to have a distinct laugh, this loud, goofy chuckle. But now, when he laughed, it was flat, almost like he was mimicking laughter. His favorite foods no longer seemed to interest him. He didn't remember his old friends, or the names of his teachers, or even small family details like the nicknames we used to call him. One night, I walked past his room and heard him talking. Curious, I pressed my ear to the door. He wasn't on the phone. He was reciting something in a language I didn't understand. Low, guttural phrases that didn't sound human. When I told my parents, they brushed it off, saying he was probably just adjusting or processing trauma. But I knew something wasn't right. The final straw came when I found him in the backyard at 3 a.m., digging. When I asked what he was doing, he looked at me, completely blank, and said, "Preparing the ground." I asked, "For what?" He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "For the others." I ran inside and locked my door. The next morning, Ethan was gone. No note, no trace. Just like before. It's been 3 years since then. Sometimes late at night I swear I hear that same low, guttural chanting outside my window. And every time I do, I wonder if Ethan will come back again, or if something else will. Story 3 by Marcus T. When I was 24, I worked at a small fishing lodge in Alaska. One summer, a guest named Liam checked in for a solo week-long trip. He was a quiet guy, maybe mid-30s, who said he just needed to get away from the city. On his third day, Liam borrowed one of the lodge's kayaks and headed out toward the inlet. He didn't come back that evening. We searched the shorelines, radioed nearby boats, even called the Coast Guard, but there was no sign of him. Days passed. The kayak was eventually found beached a few miles away, but no trace of Liam. Everyone assumed he'd drowned, and the lodge held a small memorial. About 2 weeks later, in the middle of the night, someone knocked on the lodge door. I answered and almost fell backward. It was Liam. His clothes were damp and torn, his face pale and thin, and his eyes, they didn't look right. Not in a medical way, more like there was something missing behind them. He didn't speak much, just handed over his room key, said, "Thank you," and walked off down the road. The police were called, but by the time they arrived, he was gone again. His family was contacted, but they hadn't heard from him. Nobody saw him after that night. A few days later, I checked the security cameras. The footage showed me opening the door, standing there shocked, but there was no one on the porch. I watched myself hand over the room key to empty air. We checked the key he'd returned. It was old, corroded, like it had been underwater for years. To this day, I don't know if Liam really came back, or if I handed over that key to something else pretending to be him. But I've never been able to shake the feeling that whatever it was, it's still out there, walking the shorelines, looking for the next door to knock on. Not every missing person stays gone, but sometimes, when they come back, they're not who they were. The next time you hear about someone returning after being lost, ask yourself, what really came back? And more importantly, what's still missing?